The Seventh-day Adventist Church was born as a direct fulfillment of prophecy. It did not see itself as a denomination, but as a movement with a mission. In fact, it resisted organizational structure and restraint. The leaders and members believed in the soon return of Christ. They used every means necessary to spread the news of the imminent return of Jesus. A lot of people had gotten so excited that they abandoned their businesses. They left fields and crops untended and unharvested. New England winters require preparation, and that preparation simply hadn't been done. People thought they were going to heaven in October. Instead, they wouldn't have food to eat or money for several months. Disappointment might not be a strong enough word. In the words of one Millerite, true believers had given up all for Christ, but he did not come. And now to turn again to the cares, perplexities, and dangers of life in full view of jeering and reviling unbelievers who scoffed as never before was a terrible trial of faith and patience. A Methodist paper called for thunderbolts red with uncommon wrath upon the head of Joshua Himes and other Millerites. Critics accused him of being a liar, a fearmongerer, disturber of the peace, and a cheat. Some said Himes fled the country. Some said he committed suicide. The Boston Post called the Advent leaders unprincipled men, perfectly conscious of the absurdity of their opinions and reckless of the injury they caused. In reality, Himes, Miller, and other leaders of the movement had never instructed believers to leave their jobs, sell their property, and neglect their secular responsibilities. But their faith turned them into social pariahs. William Miller himself wrote, "It passed. And the next day it seemed as though all the demons from the bottomless pit were loose upon us." Hiram Edson lamented, "Has the Bible proved a failure? Is there no God, no heaven, no golden home city, no paradise? Is all this but a cunningly devised fable? Is there no reality to our fondest hope and expectation of these things?" Luther Beutel said, "Everyone felt lonely, with hardly a desire to speak to anyone. All were silent, save to inquire, 'Where are we?' and 'What's next?' All were housed in searching their Bibles to learn what to do." Then, Hiram Edson receives a vision while walking through a field. Reinterpretation offers new hope. Early church founders want to share that hope with the believers they had lost. Ellen Harmon White is shown in a vision that James White should start a magazine. Penniless but inspired, James convinces a publisher to print 1,000 copies of The Present Truth. The magazine helps clarify what happened in 1844, and the full cost is repaid by generous readers. Publishing ministry quickly becomes central to spreading emerging Adventist doctrines like the Three Angels' Message and Sabbath Truth. To keep printers from running on the Sabbath, the church starts its own publishing house, which was literally a house that early church members lived and worked in together. Hiram Edson sold his farm and donated the money to buy a hand press. Soon the church began distributing the Second Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. Since there was no paper cutter, Uriah Smith trimmed all the edges of the magazines with his penknife. In his own words, "We blistered our hands in the operation, and often the tracks and form were not half so true and square as the doctrines they taught." At age 23, Smith would go on to serve as editor and would hold the position in some capacity for his entire life. As the publishing ministry grows, young Canadian immigrant George King comes up with the idea to sell subscriptions of Adventist publications. Signs of the Times is born. The gospel message spills out of the church and meets people right at their front door. The beginning of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was exciting. Was it something the pioneers could keep secret? Not a chance. Church pioneers assumed that those who renewed their belief would share with their brothers and sisters. The brothers and sisters would share with their cousins, and the cousins would share with their brothers and sisters, and the whole Great Commission would fulfill itself. But it didn't work out that way. I realize words like rogue and missionary don't seem like they should go together. But Michael Chikowski was like Indiana Jones or Han Solo. He was, and I quote, a stubborn, impetuous man who refused to take advice from Ellen White. History gives us the sense that he was a charismatic swindler. Yet, without him, many Adventists would have gone on believing what the Review and Herald printed in 1869. Quote, it may not be necessary to preach the gospel in any country besides our own, since our land is composed of people from almost every nation. End quote. If we reach the immigrants within the U.S., they'll witness to their friends and families overseas. The Great Commission will fulfill itself. The Church's first big push for foreign missions came in 1871, when GC delegates voted to send J.G. Matson to witness to the Scandinavians and Danes of Wisconsin. Tchaikovsky, however, was no Millerite. He was an ex-Catholic Polish priest turned obsessive Sabbatarian. He was young, idealistic, fluent in 7 or 8 languages, and terrible with money. James and Ellen White were so besotted by his personality that they helped him pay all his debts and funded his travel from Battle Creek back to New York. Later, Ellen would receive a vision telling her to stop supporting him. Tchaikovsky left a wake of burnt bridges and bad business deals behind him. Though he hated taking advice, he didn't mind taking money. So when the SDA Church wouldn't support him as a missionary to Europe, he found another denomination that would. Tchaikovsky used their money to share Adventist beliefs in Switzerland. However, he failed to inform the Swiss congregation of the home church in America. It wasn't until a church elder found a copy of the Review and Herald that Tchaikovsky's secret came out. The congregation was shocked. Naturally, their trust was bruised. The Swiss leaders wrote to the GC asking for a replacement missionary. Adventist historian David Trim writes, Adventists in America were actually sort of embarrassed to learn that there were already Adventist believers in Europe. The Americans invited the Swiss Adventists to send a delegate to the 1869 GC session. Though he arrived too late for the session, he stayed long enough to return as an ordained minister. Elsewhere, Tchaikovsky's tactics finally caught up to him. His bankroll was revoked. Disgraced, he left his family and moved to Hungary, where he would later die at 57, reportedly from exhaustion. But the Swiss church still sought a missionary, and that is how John Nevins Andrews became the first official Seventh-day Adventist missionary to Europe, as a replacement for the rogue missionary. The spirit of spreading the three angels message began to intensify within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Even J.G. Matson got to move on from the wilds of Wisconsin to his home country of Denmark. His work would lead to the first International Adventist Conference, the Scandinavian Publishing House, and Matson Institute in Meissen, Norway. The American Adventist Church was beginning to catch a glimpse of the possibilities. The gospel preached to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. The world church. But we still lacked a key component.